something quite lovely happens, or can happen, when we're alone in the kitchen. When the preparation and all of the instruction, when the training is over, when we are trained sufficiently to cook for ourselves, there's a tremendous sense of freedom, and there's also some anxiety because we're not sure that we can match the level of the cooking instruction. And so analogous to that is when we give you a retreat in which you are completely independent and self-reliant, up to your own persuasion, under the influence of your own guide, of your own inward demands. And whether you follow the demands constructively or destructively really depends upon your intentionality, what you want out of the kitchen. You can fake this retreat so that, you look good. But when it's actually, the food is actually delivered and you taste it, it can be a little bitter. You want to make sure that your intentionality is in proper alignment to your heart's purpose, to the direction you want this retreat to take. And then that sense of having the relief of having the authority of outside teachers structure the retreat for you really opens up into a creative process where you can move this thing in accordance to your own inner resonance rather than what someone is telling you to do. When someone tells you to do something, it may fit what you think the retreat is about, but it can often be cross-grained to a deeper sense of intuition in you. And here we want you to really abide within and move that sense of spiritual intuition. So you get a sense of it, that it's operating in you, and that you begin to unleash it and begin to follow its voice rather than the voices of outside instruction. Now, one of the ways that we can misunderstand Buddhism in general is that the outside instruction, when we read the texts and the suttas, it always feels like we're a little bit, impoverished because the lists and the way that the instructions, the suttas unfold are talking about all the qualities that we feel we're devoid in. The calm, the quiet, the serenity, the equanimity, the on and on, energy, the samadhi, on and on. And so when we are sort of beginning the practice, those voices, the voices of our own impoverishment, of our own insufficiency, when we read the suttas and the instructions, feels like we have a lot to do. There's a lot we have to cultivate, nourish in ourselves, that our skill level isn't up to where the Buddha seems to be pointing. And we feel replete and just hopelessly overwhelmed. Okay, so that's a phase of practice. It's important to understand that the beginning phases of practice come from a particular paradigm that have run our lives. And that paradigm is one in which there's a constant sense within us of a lacking, of an incompletion, of discontentment. And we're trying to overcome those states of mind to get to a place where we can feel content. And that's how the old paradigm works. The best it envisions as a successful retreat is feeling content, where you're no longer feeling the deprivation of our insufficiency. And so much of the early practice years goes to compensation, trying to offset the imbalance we feel that's there. Then there's a maturity crisis when we realize that no matter how many years you practice, you still feel out of balance. That's a crisis, and in which the practice really, you see that you failed. Failed in the way that you have been depicting and have been holding the practice, what it will eventually do to you. You have failed in what you think is the summation, is the end product. And all of us do. All of us have to go through that sense of having failed it, because we still feel incomplete, we still feel discontent, we still feel the impoverishment that, if we look, may have improved some since the beginning when we started, but it's still there in us. It's still nagging its way forward. And so at that point, there needs to be a shift in what and how we hold the practice and how we look at it. The paradigm needs to shift. We can no longer be held within the bounds of how our thinking is encouraging us towards ambition and productivity and cultivating and moving forward and finishing and all of that. That very thinking has kept us in a kind of locked position and has forced us to maintain the direction we have, which has, if we are honest with ourselves, not been has been lacking in some way, has been insufficient in bringing us to a sense of completion. Now we enter a new paradigm, okay, and quite a bit of maturity has had to occur for that new paradigm to be crossed. No longer is the voice of the mind the predominant voice of your control system. You're in the kitchen without instruction now, even your inward instruction. You know, you don't have enough sugar in the recipe or too much salt, or all of that has to be allowed so that the whole creativity process begins to open beyond someone's reliance other than your own. And it's a tremendous sense, it can feel a tremendous sense of aloneness, on your ownness. And yet it is absolutely essential for this to mature. And so when the maturity, there's a question of what I need to do to advance, allow my practice to move forward, or even the thought of it moving forward is being questioned. So all of the old ways that our practice have been dependent upon, the old energy systems and the goals and the fruitions, all of that has to be challenged now. Because those, when misaligned within the old paradigm of thought, have made us very tense and tight around the product that we are going to become, even as we see it recede further and further from our grasp. And so it's the paradigm that has to shift. Your mind isn't going to come along easily here. Right? So you in maturity is a different, maturity itself is maturing out of that monologue that's going on. We're maturing out of the dominance of the mind, the dominant direction of the mind. We're maturing out of that. It's not so important anymore what's going on emotionally or psychologically, or not because it doesn't have something to tell us about our past and, you know, in our grief, and it does. It has, but there's something much bigger here than sort of working ourselves out of one mind state into another. And there will always be another mind state waiting for you if you stay within the dictates of the mind. That's all the mind can offer you, is another state of mind. So you may have worked out the particular state of mind that you have been tangled within, only to find yourself in another after that. It's endless. It's endless. And so the maturity is also maturity of the heart's view that just says, enough of this. Let's put an end to this thing. And then there's a tuning of oneself within the same environment. The mind is continuing to do whatever it's always done. But there's a context now that, because I'm settled within whatever the mind is doing and not fighting or struggling with it, there's a new context, a new environment that opens within that I see far richer than the old. It brings something out of me which the old paradigm could never do. Something inside of me gets interested and curious. And there is a compelling force in us that wants to dislodge ourselves from the ways that we have been holding and limiting ourselves for so many years. So it doesn't mean that there's some cleanup that many of us have to do within the old paradigm to reach that maturity. Okay, the cleanup is important. You have to have a certain sense of self-appreciation, or you're just going to be fighting yourself forever in this game. So if you don't have sufficient self-appreciation or self-kindness or just a love of being who you are, then we have to offset the tendency to look discouragingly at ourselves with encouraging phrases so that we can see the beauty that's there, not just the marks of deficiency. Okay, so we'll be doing some of that during the retreat. But that's really, that's touch-up work. That's creating the foundation so that we can move. We think of it as the movement itself. That's just solidifying the foundation sufficiently so that we have the capacity to move. And there's also the capacity to hold our mind steady enough so that we can see, and that lamp of attention is steady enough, and there's some hard work and effort that's needed to shore up the mind's ability to attend. And that's all old paradigm stuff, putting in hard work, establishing contact with the breath, resting, and so that the lamp of our attention steadies itself sufficiently. That's important. But it's all foundation. That's not the practice itself. I mean, that's not the end product. That's not the movement towards the new paradigm. That's just shoring up the old paradigm so that you can even see that you're in a mess. Right? So that's important. Also, if you're noisy inside and a lot of stuff's going on, it's hard to see. So having some ability to calm one's mind, being quiet, invites a different environment so that I can see. It's easier to see when we're quiet than when we're noisy. So that comes along with the samadhi training and the steadiness of attention and the self-appreciation. The mind quiets. But that's the prerequisite. The prerequisite. Then there's the movement. And the movement is the understanding or the accessing of this new paradigm, this new possibility, this new other that we have never shown much interest in, because all we've been doing is struggling with the forms of our own world, of our own life. And we've been missing something that holds and raises the level of everything. And when we're mature sufficiently so that we can move from this old paradigm, this new paradigm has been waiting for us since time immemorial. Of course it's there. And we're no longer letting the old paradigm depict it as being anywhere else. It's not in the Himalayan caves. It's not with a certain teacher. It's not doing a certain practice or performing a certain rite or ritual. It's being willing to say enough of the old paradigm and being quiet, sufficiently quiet so that we can perceive or sense something else. And that is why we come together.